was staying over at my girlfriend's. She lives next to a river in a small cul-de-sac. Anyway, it was about 11 and we decided to take the dog for a walk, and we brought the flashlight with us so we could see, cause her road had a distinct lack of lighting, because we live in a rural area of the UK. We were walking along down the side of the river, temperatures close to zero, when we could hear something struggling in the water. We shine the flashlight on the water, and it's completely still, which we thought was a bit odd, but we dismissed it as a duck or something. We crossed the bridge which came to pasture and heard the noise in the water again, so I ran straight to the top of the little bridge and shone the torch looking for something, maybe a lamb that had fallen in the water, and I shit you not, in the middle of the river I saw a large, pale, obviously dead face rise up from the depths and disappear again. We phoned the police and they turned up and searched the river. They also said it wasn't the first time they had been called out because of the same thing. This is the closest thing to a paranormal story that has happened to me. I was 9, maybe 10, spending a couple days in my grandmother's house, because there was some kind of pest in my house. 3 a.m., trying to sleep in a mattress next to her bed. The house was pretty small. Suddenly I hear a noise coming from the living room. The only way to describe it would be the sound of broken glass mixed with rain, like something constantly breaking. Freak out immediately, because I know such sound can't normally exist, and if the huge mirror in the living room somehow broke itself, the sound would have stopped. Wake up my grandma. Do you hear that? What? No, go back to sleep. Big fucking surprise, she had enough trouble hearing my question. Decide to man up and go find out what it is. I started walking through the hallway, while the sound intensified as I came closer. The sound stops the moment I put a foot in the living room. Look around and see nothing. Then I watched myself in the mirror, in the middle of the dark. Suddenly feel cold and out of place, like being watched by someone who didn't want me there. Run the fuck back to bed. The noise stopped, but I couldn't sleep that night. I still remember the sound. The summer after my junior year of high school, my family stayed at a hotel in Panama City Beach called Inn Paradise. It was a cheap hotel, but it was right alongside the beach. Anyway, the third night we're there, my dad meets this black dude that was down at the beach and he invited him to hang out and have a few drinks. They get drunk and talk and have a good time, and my dad invites him to hang out the next night. He says no, because he has plans with friends. So the next night we go to bed early. Around 4 in the morning we are woken up by a knock on the door. A policeman tells us that our hotel room had been broken into, but they had caught the guy who did it. We assumed the black dude had broken in and stole our shit, because he is sitting there talking to the cops. We come to find out that a 6'6" white dude with a gun and a fillet knife, who was mentally unstable by the way, had broken into our room and raided the place. The only reason anybody found out about this is because the black dude the night before was hanging out with his other black friends down by the beach and they intervened and apprehended him. We found out he had been living in a room in the hotel for 2 weeks, and we found a bunch of stolen shit in his room, along with used needles and a lot of prescription drugs. We could have been killed. This is why I now own a gun. I live in a small, quiet village and have been night walking my dogs for 10 years now, never saw anything strange. One time I did stop, dog pissing, at the edge of a pitch black lane of old fir trees. Lane leads to an abandoned house up the hill. Couldn't see shit because woods are black and I'm on a sodium lit street. Anyhow, I stand around as dog pisses. Dog indicates something's in the woods. I can read him very well by now, and can tell when it's a cat, prey animal, hedgehog, bird, an adult human or a child that he's noticing, and whether they're coming our way, but made like it was a person not moving. A person in the woods in our super quiet little village at 3 in the night, just standing there? This got me alert. I peer into the woods and suddenly get an overwhelming sense of being stared back at. Never experienced anything like that before. The dog indicates it isn't coming toward us, just staring. I continue to stare into the dark, not particularly frightened, until out of nowhere I get an adrenaline rush like I'll have to fight or run now. I back away slowly and walk calmly away, keeping my eye on the woods. Nothing happens. The thing is, I'm never scared. Especially not of people. I've been in fights and been in the woods at night and hardly get an elevated pulse. But that, man. I've never felt anything like that. Also, it wasn't just me. I know my dog like the back of my hand, and he was indicating a motionless person within 50 meters or so. Walking away, the dog kept turning back to stare at the woods. Dunno. In before underage ban. About 6 years ago when I was 15, I was in the Boy Scouts. I was at a cabin and we were playing Capture the Flag. There were 10 people playing. I'm not going to say names. We were playing on the bank of a river. The cabin faced the river, and we had trucks on both sides. All 5 members of each team met at the truce line. Basically, you can't get tagged on your own turf. Each team got half. You can get tagged on the other side. If you do get tagged by the other team, you sit in jail until someone else from your team sneaks up and tags you out. So I was at the truce line, and snuck around carefully, then right before my teammates in the other team assigned flags, and whatnot, I snuck into the forest on my enemy team's side. I was going to watch where they put the flag, tag team members out, and be a general badass. However, when I got about 15 feet into the woods, I heard something call my friend's name. In a whisper. Noah, Noah. So I got up and got the fuck out. I ran to the truce line and got kicked out for cheating. I sat by the fire with the other 6 people who weren't playing. Here's the creepy part. 9 people were playing, me and 6 were sitting it out. That's 16 scouts. Only 16 came. There were 4 scoutmasters sitting near a fire next to ours. I couldn't place the voice, but I heard it. Later my friend who had his name called, left. His mom came to pick him up cause his dog was sick or something. So, there's my story. A lot of you might not find this scary, but it was the most terrifying dream for me. Also, it's not a typically paranormal thing. Anyway, here goes. Dreaming about a weird higher class cafe in what appears to be a skyscraper, marble stone, gold lining. With girlfriend and ex-friend who she used to date at a table. He's explaining how his rich dad is going to give them $1,000 a month apartment. I'm still dating her in my mind, so I'm like, what the fuck to her, cause she seems all into it. I attempt to reach out to her, recalling how she said money is unimportant in contrast with our love. Gay, I know. She doesn't even acknowledge me, but giggles as he mentions the ring he'll get her with his dad's big bucks. Every memory of her saying how I was better comes to mind, but now with money she wants him. I rage like a chimp. They laugh, a waiter comes and exclaims, what's wrong with this loser? After a lot of that is me talking to her on the phone and then driving to see her, anticlimactic mostly. Just a real deep breakup feeling. I give a fuck, she doesn't give a single. Wallowing in anguish, what am I going to do now? Dream was so real and deeply impactful, I remember thinking I wish this was a dream so I could wake up. Fast forward, I'm in a townhouse talking to ex-friend's mom and dad. Rather than console me, they go on about how I'm an awful person for dating the girl in the first place, was his ex should have mentioned. They also go into great detail about how he is smarter and better than me and how I'm just a simpleton for not going to university. Feels lame as fuck, almost seems like something they do. Can't take it anymore, head upstairs. They're in bed sitting against wall clothed. A glaze of contentment covers their eyes. I plead to the girl, I thought you loved me blah blah blah, she seems so disinterested and unreachable. Ex-friend has a little smirk. After more circular conversation I give up and leave. Fast forward again, I'm in a snowy parking lot outside a bar in my car. Get phone call, it's her. She goes on about how her love was much deeper for him and more complex, penis size, intelligence, fortune as well. I can't help but plead to the part of her I used to know, but to a disinterested response. She stops talking suddenly, I hear the purring and moaning of them fucking for about 20 seconds before I wake up, 4 hours before usual time. I still can't believe I woke up. It felt more real than any dream. I have a lingering dread and feeling of breakup. I don't even want to talk to her. Let me add again, sorry for not being classic paranormal, but to me it was the most horrifying dream I've ever had, scarier than any alien or monster one. B13. Riding my bike to my dad's house. The sky is completely clear of clouds, nothing but blue all around. The sun is beating down on me, so I stop at a gas station to get a drink. As I walk out, I'm standing next to my bike taking a drink. Sky is still clear. I look up and I see a thick, silver line in the sky. It doesn't have wings, it isn't making any sound, doesn't seem to be an airplane. It's stationary, remains in the same spot for about 35 seconds. Suddenly it zips off to the right and disappears completely. Still no cloud cover or anything. No fucking clue what it was. I have a couple more that aren't UFO stories, but this one was weird. B now, 21, almost 22. Moved out to the country to live in peace. I always hear weird noises outside at night. Sometimes it's coyotes, other times it's noises I don't think an animal can make. I've investigated the area around my house at night when I hear these noises and found nothing. One night I heard the noises and something banged on the window in my living room. I ran outside with a gun and flashlight, absolutely nothing was there. Another night I heard something walking around the side of my house while in the garage. I ran to the side of the house with a gun and flashlight again. Nothing there. I checked all around the house and found nothing. If it was a person or animal, I'd be able to see them running off because it's nothing but cornfields around my house. No birds or bats in the sky, they don't make the noises I hear anyway. Bought a dog shortly after moving here and hearing those noises. Dog always flips out when the coyotes come out, like he wants to go kill them. When the other, unknown noises start up, he looks super alert, but doesn't bark or flip out. Staring outside and growling is the most he'll do, but his ears and tail are always erect. I buy a digital recorder to record the noises. I'm at my friend's house one day showing her. We get on the topic of EVPs and ghosts. She doesn't believe ghosts or anything. For shits and giggles I tell her we should try to get some EVPs. We do our own session in the guest bedroom. We're in there for probably 15 to 20 minutes and don't hear anything out of the ordinary. When we listen to the recording, there's a lot of popping noises, a few scrapes, and a really loud bark, like a dog. She doesn't own a dog at all. The bark was super clear, as if the dog was in the room and right next to the recorder. There's literally nothing that could replicate that sound, in or around her home. In the recording we don't even react to it. We just keep doing what we were doing. For some reason it's kind of creepy, but I still have the recording. I've never told this story to anyone before, because I still cannot wrap my mind around what actually happened. When I was around 6, I lived with my grandparents. My room was in the attic. As a child, I was obsessed with supernatural things, and there were no other kids on my street, so I had a lot of alone time to sit and think about these types of things. My grandparents had a massive backyard that, at nighttime, was impenetrably dark. I never went back there, and neither did my family. It was so eerie. I remember wondering what happened back there at nighttime for an excessive amount of time one night before bed. I eventually fell asleep. I woke up sweating in the middle of the night, and as a person who never gets up fast, this was strange. I mean, I was immediately wide awake. Now, my room was shaped like a little kid's drawing of a house. The ceiling came to a point and moved down to the floor on either side until it was about a foot away from the ground. My bed was on one end. All of my belongings and clothes were in the closet at the foot of my bed, and on the other end was an electrical socket. There was never anything plugged into that socket for whatever reason. I remember looking over at that socket and seeing a dark blue and orange mist start to pour out from it. It started to make its way up the ceiling until it completely cloaked the other half of my small room. I started to be able to make a face out in this mist. There were giant eyes and a surprisingly friendly smile. The face never changed, and it never spoke aloud, but I got a sense within me. It was communicating to me from within. I knew strongly what it wanted then, but can't recall what it was trying to say now. It slowly retreated back into the socket. I didn't fall back asleep until the sun came up. I never told anyone about this. Maybe it was fear, maybe it was whatever this thing was trying to communicate to me, but I have never told a soul about this. A year later, my mom got married, and we moved out of my grandparents' house, about 10 minutes from where they still live today. Years passed as they do, and I grew up normally. I was, and still am, a little more infatuated with drugs than most other people, but it never affected me really. I was always an honor student and had plenty of friends. Well, anyways, after my first experience with acid, I started to get strange dreams. I kept having dreams with demons and monsters that were dark blue and orange, just like the mist I saw when I was a kid. I brushed this off because, like I said, I was stoned all the time, and weird thoughts were always going through my head. A few more years passed, and I was talking to my grandfather about whether or not he's ever experienced anything out of the norm. Now, he's a retired carpenter who hangs out in biker bars, so I never got the sense that he's the type of guy to just bullshit about things. And this is fucking uncanny. He told me that one night while he was out back smoking a cigarette, he thought he saw a glowing figure make its way across the backyard. I asked if he was serious, and he said yes. He described it as a dark blue and orange mist. I nearly lost my mind when he told me this. Lately, these dreams have been recurring more and more. Any ideas on how I could possibly conjure up this thing while I'm awake? I need to know what it was trying to tell me. Got a couple stories of my house/grandparents' old house we visited. Anyway, bit of background first. We bought our house about 6 years ago, always felt kinda creepy. Weird stuff started happening since we moved in. Also have a younger sister, she's 9 now, but all the stuff was happening when she was around 3 to 5. Kinda slowed a bit now. First happening, this one happened to me. Have my own room, located as one of the rooms off the upstairs hallway. Hallway is creepy as shit. Always feel like something is watching you. Sometimes see dark shadows. I'm in my room late at night, sat near my bedroom door. Concentration is on sewing. House is silent, everyone else is asleep. Hear these shuffling steps on the other side of the door. Figure maybe someone's awake walking round. No. Would have heard the bedroom doors open. Can hear this deep sort of breathing in a low sigh on the other side of the door. Voice and footsteps stop. No other noises or retreating footsteps, just stops. Second story. Happened at my house again, but this time with my younger sister. I was out at the time, but my mum told me later on after it happened. 5-year-old sister downstairs in the living room watching TV. Mum is upstairs getting the washing together to bring down. Little sister runs upstairs to my mum, Daddy's home. Mum is confused. He's at work. Shouldn't have been home for another hour or so. Goes downstairs with my sister. Asked her where he was. She says he came through the door, ran past the TV and into the garden. No one in the garden, doors all locked. Asks what she saw. Said it looked like Daddy. Had a mustache like him. Dad comes back from work. Everyone is confused. Third story. Same house. Happened to me. Same creepy hallway, one of the rooms leading off from it is the bathroom. Heading towards it from the stairs. Door at the end of the hallway bangs open just as I'm nearing the bathroom door. Something falls off the side somewhere in the room at the end of the hallway. Go to investigate, it's some giant parrot thing. No windows open to cause a draft. Kinda confused. There's nothing to cause a door to open that fast or make things fall like that. Fourth story, same house. Happened to my dad and my little sister. room at the end of the hallway is my parents' room. Dad and little sister laying on the bed in the dark talking. Little sister is 5. He starts telling her cat stories, etc. Stories finish and she asks my dad about the man at the end of the bed. He asks her what man she means. Points to this empty space at the foot of the bed near the window. That little man over there. Dad was really weirded out by it. She kept looking at that spot and pointing at it. 5th story, from my mom. Younger sister has difficulty sleeping. Mom sometimes lays down with her until she falls asleep. Mom was laying down with her one night. Little sister asleep. She heard a door being opened, thought it was someone getting a drink. Started hearing footsteps near the bedroom she was in. Door opened slowly. Mom heard a voice in the room. Told me it said, "Don't worry. I'm home now." Most recent event that happened in our house a couple months ago. Not so much scary, but weird and probably ties in with other stuff. Couple months ago Mom decides we need insulation in our attic. Hires contractors to come put up insulation in the attic. During their process they had to pull up a few boards to get insulation underneath. Found a necklace in a box. All gold leaves on a chain. Box was buried underneath these boards and they had been nailed over the top. Doesn't belong to any of us, never seen it before, and the box is sort of covered in these flowered patterns. I have some stories of my own, although they're not all that great. I also have some stories that my parents told me that had happened to them, if you guys are interested. I'll start off though with one that happened to me when I lived at my dad's house. Like I said, not that great, but it's something. Be me, 2009-ish. House is haunted, but only I can detect it for some reason. Now this is weird, since I'm not exactly sensitive to the paranormal. That has always been my sister, although I don't know how true her stories are, since she has always been an attention whore and would say anything as long as we had her attention. Also, before I continue, my room is very small and my bed is right next to the wall. For some reason, I always have to sleep on the open side of the bed, away from the wall, and I normally sleep facing away from the wall. So continued. Trying to fall asleep. Tonight I am facing the wall as I sleep with my legs at a slight angle. The room to my back, I hear some creaking going on behind me. I then feel a pressure pushing down on the angle behind my legs. If you were to take your hand and push it against a cushion or your bed, it was like that. Didn't know .gif, since I knew house was haunted and it was harmless. Go to sleep, wake up next day with that pressure gone. I told my family a few weeks later about it, since we're all pretty accepting of the paranormal. Although they're skeptical, since they haven't experienced anything. After I moved out, my little stepsister at the time told me that she started to experience things. Although what she told me was exactly what I had told everyone else before, so I didn't exactly believe her. Like I said, not the best/scariest story. I do have more, creepier ones that my parents told me happened to them. The ones that I have personally are pretty boring, like this one. Fuck it, I want to keep this thread alive. We finally have a non-shitty thread on X. So this next one is one that my dad and his side of the family always told us. Backstory is this: they used to live in a house in the middle of a field. It's the typical house you would imagine, too. White, 2-story, wraparound porch, corn everywhere. The reason I know all that is because we drove by it about 8 years ago. Anyways, according to what they all told me, it was my dad, my grandparents and my great-grandparents all living in this house. They lived there about a year before all this started to happen, and it all happened suddenly. So basically, the haunting started with a very odd smell that progressively got worse. Got to the point where the dog they had would spend more time away from home than at home. Then one day, my great-grandmother left out a chicken to cook that night, and she left in order to go to the store. My dad just got out of school before she came home, and when he got off the bus he said that the smell was 10 times worse than what it has been. As he walked towards the house, he saw a blood trail all the way around the porch leading to the back of the house. He stayed at the end of the driveway, waiting for his parents to get home. They searched the house and found that the blood trail belonged to the chicken that was left out. They checked the kitchen window and also saw that it was broken. Fearing that someone broke in, they called the cops. When the cops got there, they had brought the police dogs with them. Apparently, the closer the police got to the house, the more restless the dogs got. And when it was time to have the dogs come out to sniff around for a scent, they refused to come out of the car. So after the police left, that night everyone was up trying to figure out what had happened. My dad told me that it was about midnight when they began to hear footsteps outside, along with what sounded like nails being dragged across the side of the house. This kept up for about an hour, he told me. The next night, the same thing happened, footsteps and scratching. The next day they looked outside, and there were small scratch marks on the side of the house. The next night, my family had called up their friends and had them stay over. Being in North Carolina in the 70s, they had brought over a shotgun, thinking it was a normal person and that my family's imagination just got the best of them. Sure enough though, the same thing happened. Scratching, footsteps, but this time they heard a screech. According to my dad and granddad, it sounded like tires on pavement, a cat's yawl and a dog's growl with a woman's scream all at the same time. Freaking out, one of the neighbors opened the door and turned on the porch light. From what they had described, they saw a shadow on the porch that looked like a hunchback woman with long nails, pacing back and forth. Even after everything ended, nobody went to sleep and nobody left until the morning. After this happened, my family quickly left the house. I don't remember if we knew what exactly it was, or what the backstory of the house is. Apparently though, the families that moved into the house after my family moved out didn't have any experiences. I don't know how true any of this is, since I wasn't even thought of yet. The next story I have is more believable though. Well, this all happened while my parents were still together and about a year after my oldest sister was born. Well, in this house there were 2 stories and a basement. The stairs leading upstairs were connected to the stairs leading to the basement and that stairway was in the kitchen. The first story that I had happened to my mom. She was in the kitchen doing the dishes when she heard someone walking in the kitchen. As she turned around, she saw my dad head downstairs. A few moments later, she heard someone walking downstairs from the 2nd floor, and when she turned around she saw my dad. Were you upstairs this whole time? Yeah, I was up there for about an hour or so. But I just saw you go downstairs. Haha, no I didn't. Yeah, you did, I just saw you. Dad just shrugged and went downstairs, finding no one but my sister's crib. Now another scene for the future, my sister's crib was downstairs, as well as the washer and dryer, and under the staircase was a closet with nothing but coat hangers in it. That being said, we go into the next story. This time, my mom was downstairs doing the laundry. My sister was in her crib when she started giggling. Mom didn't really think of it until my sister started to do that baby talk along with the giggling, as if someone was there. As my mom walked over to the crib, she saw the coat hangers rattle, as if someone had glided their hands over them, causing them to hit each other. Mom grabbed my sister and noped out of there. The last one that I remember her telling me actually involved my dad. My dad worked at a place where he had to wear ties, and one day all of his ties went missing except for this ugly pink smiley face one. For the whole week, they couldn't find the ties. My sister's crib was still downstairs, and one day as my mom put her to bed she decided to look into the downstairs closet. When she looked, there were all of my dad's ties in a pile. No one knows how they got there. This is a long one, so get cozy. Up until last month, November 2013, I worked for Xerox. More specifically, I was a floor supervisor for the customer support line Xerox ran for Sprint. For those of you who don't know, Xerox Corporation runs a fuck ton of customer service lines for companies who don't want to do it themselves, and don't want to outsource it. The building we worked in was old. Probably 50s or 60s, but it had been refurbished, and was like a fucking labyrinth, with walls that were able to be slid open or closed depending on how much space certain lines needed, etc. When I worked there were 5 different organizations inside. Comcast Cable, Xfinity, Sprint Wireless and Mobile, Walgreens Pharmacy Support, Home Depot Support Line, AT&T. So anyway, when I was in training in 2010, I learned there had been a fucking murder in the building before I arrived. A rep's boyfriend had gotten pissed at her, came in to meet her for lunch, and then stabbed her to death on the elevator. He was captured, of course. Well, we were in a shitty part of town anyway, so I chose not to think too much about it. This takes place a few days after I started, post-training. I was in one of the classrooms. I chose to eat lunch there when there were no training classes in session because it was a lot quieter than the break room, and I heard someone coming down the storeroom hallway behind me. I didn't think much about it, there was a training class in the room over. So I hear the footsteps stop at the entrance to the classroom, and something jiggling the door handle. I know for a fact that it isn't locked, mainly because, for security reasons, that hallway door doesn't have a lock. So I get up, go to the door, and open it. There's an audible whoosh, and a fuck ton of supplies go falling off the shelves, all over the floor. I pass it off as some weird air pressure thing and finish lunch, albeit a little unnerved. Pick-related, the floor plan of the office's third floor. So after that, things were quiet for a while. I did my job well, had my own team on the floor. Some weird shit would happen now and again, thinking I saw something out of the corner of my eye, or the microwave in the break room's door swinging open at random times, but it was never anything I thought too much about. And then I got changed to the night shift. From 11 p.m. to 6 a.m., me and 10 other individuals were virtually locked inside the building, with myself having the only outside door key. It wasn't too bad, at first. It was really fucking quiet, and we only got 2, maybe 3 calls a night, so most of the time we were dicking around, attempting to troubleshoot known problems in CST, meaning customer support tool, basically a giant database of known errors, fixes, troubleshooting methods, activation numbers, etc. One night around 2:30 a.m., a team member left to go to the bathroom. He got out the door when he scrambled back inside, slammed the security door and said that there was someone in one of the bathrooms. I looked at him, we'll call him Frank, like he was a fucking idiot, and asked him what he was talking about. Frank said that he'd opened the door, was about to head to the bathroom, when he saw the female bathroom door close. Those doors are heavy as fuck, and audibly click when they close, to avoid anyone sneaking into them. Concern rippled through the team, and the general consensus was that we should check it out before calling the police and looking like a bunch of idiots. 4 of us volunteered to go into all the rooms our security card could access, and make sure we were the only ones on the floor, at least. Anything on the second floor could eat a dick, and the morning people would meet anything on the first. We steeled ourselves, opened the door into the hall, and stepped out. It was pretty fucking hot in the hall, which was weird given the time of year, but we chalked it up to weird Tennessee weather and pressed on. Frank led the way, pointing at the women's room and saying that was the door that had closed. The one female, we'll call her Lisa, in our party opened it up, and let out a loud, "What the fuck?" The trash bin had been tipped over, and the day's waste dragged all around the floor. The stall doors were all closed, and upon further inspection, locked. One of the light panels had fallen, and shattered on the tile, but the bulbs were still in place, albeit flickering from time to time. It looked like a fucking twister had been through it. But there was no one in there, and the door, as far as we know, hadn't been opened since Frank came bawling back. Like the hallway, it was fucking sweltering in there. More irritated than frightened at this point at having to fill out a vandalism report to upper management, we left the room as was, and proceeded through each of the other rooms we could get into, which was all of them but the what room and the Home Depot room. The only other room that appeared tampered with was the break room, which had its lights turned on. Break room lights were turned off by the evening crew at 8 p.m., to save energy. We figured someone had just forgot to turn it off, and more than likely, that's really what had happened. I finished my shift, filled out the report and left, a little unnerved and very irritated, but was too groggy to really think of anything about it. So about 6 months passed between that event and the next. Some dipshit had decided to light up on his last day here, and ended up accidentally starting a fire. It was contained, but the smoke and damage was too expensive to repair, so they just sealed it off behind one of those walls, and used the place to store old customer records and broken office equipment, including a bunch of old chairs after we replaced them. For that reason they kept an unlocked door to the place, and kept the security door from the hallway active. A quick explanation about these doors: they were unlocked via a security badge that you scanned to unlock it. Every scan was registered to security and IT, with your employee ID number, who it belonged to, etc., to prevent theft and other unscrupulous activity. They emit a quiet beep when the badge is accepted, and the door unlocks. When it's a door you can't go in, it emits a louder beep beep beep, and the attempted access is flagged on the tracking program in IT and security, and placed on a separate list. Get too many of those, and your employment will be terminated for constantly trying to get into places you weren't allowed in. So one night, it's me and my trusty crew. It's around March, and everyone in my team really had a thing for basketball, so we were watching a game we DVR'd on the office TV. As Comcast had a stake in the building, each floor was equipped with a TV plus a DVR, each shift was allowed to record one thing. We chose basketball, as it made the night way less boring. As I was watching, I heard a quiet beep beep beep. I didn't think much about it, being engrossed in television. Then, from our door, beep beep beep. We all froze. It was the same team as before, for the most part, minus Lisa, who had left over Christmas and transferred to the Raleigh Center. It came again. Beep beep beep. Beep beep beep. Beep beep beep. Beep beep beep. Panicked, now, the team entered emergency mode. They proceeded to their cubicles and pretended to be working on something, but I wasn't satisfied. I moved to the door. Large, wooden, with 2 panels of glass on either side, not near large enough for a person to fit through, with that weird blurred effect that stops you from really seeing anything. It was purely decorative. All the while, this fucking beeping was still happening. At such a rate that I assumed the door was just broken. I pressed my face against the glass as hard as I could to get a look at our would-be assailant. Nothing. Not a fucking soul. The beeping continued, and then I nearly shit myself. Something darted past the glass. Small and pale, it was impossible to make anything else out due to the blur effect of the glass. The beeping resumed as I screamed for someone to call security. There was definitely someone or something up here. While someone dialed the number for security, rain began to pound on the windows. Good old goddamn Tennessee weather. The TV switched to a severe thunderstorm warning for our county, as the beep beep beeping continued from down the hall, then at our end, then at the fire end, then at our end. Suddenly, it stopped altogether, as Frank continued to wait for the one night shift guard to answer the phone. Then, the noise I was dreading. A single, solid tone beep of the door at the end of the hall unlocking. The wall was up, at least, so whoever it was. I nearly fucking pissed myself. The unlocked door to the flamed up end of the call floor was, as usual, unlocked. I broke into a sprint as another employee realized the same thing I did. We braced ourselves against the door, not considering how fucked we'd be if this guy had a gun to just shoot through. The handle jiggled furiously for what seemed like minutes, but in retrospect couldn't have been more than a few seconds. It went up and down the wall, slamming against it, shaking the entire flimsy thing. I could hear chairs rolling about on the wood floors, carpet long gone in there. A machine flipped over and crashed, papers flying around. We'd gotten wise. Quickly rolling our chairs against the door and hiding elsewhere in the floor, waiting for it all to be over. The night shift guard still hadn't answered. Knowing how lackluster our security force was, he was probably in his office, eating or sleeping or wanking. I don't know what the fuck he did all night down there, but it sure as shit wasn't guard anything. Thunder crashed, and the lights flickered out. Everyone let out something similar to a scream or an oh shit. And tensed. The banging stopped for a moment. In the event of a power outage, none of the security doors lock, so that if the power's out because of a fire no one roasts to death. I could hear my heart beating in my ears as I peered over towards our call floor's door, and heard it cut through the air as it opened. I clenched my eyes shut, waiting for gunshots to start going off as some deranged office shooter prowled through the darkness, praying I wasn't going to fucking die here. Instead, all I heard was moist, ragged breath as something, that's all I can describe it as, moved about the floor. None of us dare speak or move, to avoid alerting whatever it was, as it tossed papers around, threw phones off desks, and chucked a monitor. Chairs were tipped over. One cubicle had its wall completely knocked down. I heard frantic muttering near Frank's location. The man was a devout Catholic, so I'm sure it was a prayer or something. Slowly, whatever it was tread near the desk I'd quickly crawled under. It ripped the chair away. I nearly shoved my fist in my mouth to keep from screaming, the metallic taste of blood in my mouth as I sank my teeth into my knuckle. It remained there a few moments, before the southern drawl of our security guard echoed. "Are y'all okay?" There was a horrific noise from whatever the fuck it was. Ghost, monster, the goddamn boogeyman, I don't fucking know. But it screeched, and the sound of the dividing wall collapsing was audible as he let out a startled, "What the fuck?" and gave chase. We all remained in the dead silent blackness for at least another 30 minutes, until the hum of sweet light returning was audible, and its visual blinding and disorientating for a few moments. We said nothing. The security guard returned and asked if we were okay. We said we were, and he returned downstairs. We cleaned up, not wanting to even remotely try and explain how any of this had happened. We'd be called crazy, and fired, especially since the power outage meant the cameras hadn't caught shit. We finished our shift without saying a word to each other, and went home. Our team was moved downstairs shortly after, thank God, and nothing happened from then on. I don't have any conclusive evidence or statement as to what happened. All I know is that the IT guy came to me the next morning asking why there were like 100 failed security checks on each door from an ID badge that had no employee ID assigned to it, and was labeled null, an inactive badge, either a discharged employee or one that never had coding on it to begin with. I shrugged and joked maybe a ghost did it. I remained there until last month, when I transferred to the Raleigh branch with Lisa. On my last day there, I took a final walk around the 3rd floor, just to see if anything would happen. Nothing did, but the entire time, I felt like I had holes being stared in me. So that's my experience. Sorry there's no big conclusion or epic showdown of some kind, but that's what it is. Needless to say, I came out of the job with some firm changes in my beliefs. Alright, sure. First off, I gotta let you know, I don't expect you guys to believe me. Hell, I barely believe me, and part of me wants to dismiss it as being a result of all the drugs and alcohol I was on at the time, but given that it was specific to that location, and the fact that I have a scar to prove it, and frankly, how real it all felt, I don't really buy that. So I guess really this is just me getting it off my chest. Back in 2011 I was in the Fort Campbell Army Base Warrior Transition Unit after being medevaced from Afghanistan. For those that care to know, I got sploded and it fucked up my back, hip, and knees. Anyway, the barracks they stuck us in were gods know how old, but they'd been holding injured, crazy, dying, and suicidal soldiers for a very long time. Shit like that tends to collect bad junior, I've learned. And I've been to quite a few transient places, hospitals, homeless shelters, mental facilities, for depression, in case anyone's thinking I'm just schizophrenic, to know that vibe. This place however, it felt angry, seems too cheesy. It felt like something was about to happen, like the calm before the storm. That guttural feeling you get when you're a kid with a bad report card about to be opened. Anyway, one night, a couple of weeks in this place, I heard someone in the next room making banging noises and moaning gibberish at like 3 in the morning. This continued for the next 2 days, sometimes I even thought there were scraping noises against my wall, until my squad leader asked me if I'd been sleeping alright, wondering if my pain meds weren't working. I told him about the sounds next door, thinking this was someone really passionate about their masturbation and whatnot. He talks to me the next day, saying he'd looked into it, and there was no one living next door to me. Surmising that it might have been echoing from upstairs. So I look into it. The floor above me was this guy named Bashing. Real quiet type, into computers and trip hop, slept all the time. I kinda doubted he was the source of the noise, but I asked anyway. He pointed out that as a matter of fact he'd been up at 3 a.m., but he was lying in bed listening to his earphones. His roommate was still in the hospital too, so he got ruled out. I tried his neighbor as well, for safe measure, but he said he was knocked out, and he was in for stomach problems, so it was unlikely he was having PTSD-related night terrors. So I leave it be, and that night, I hear the noise again. This time, I get pissed, and even though I know the next room is empty, I knock hard against the wall. I was actually surprised when it stopped. For a moment. Next there was no banging, no moans, only that scraping sound in intervals. I told myself it could be rats in the walls or some shit, but that wouldn't account for the banging and moaning. I almost laughed. I was freaked out, yeah, but I thought spooky moaning sounds had to be the most cliché style of haunting there had to be. The next day, I had staff duty, which meant I was working the front desk all day, but also meant I had access to all the room keys. So I waited for some dumbass to lock themselves out of their rooms, then taking advantage and sneaking a peek at the room next door. Only it turns out that it didn't lock at all. The inside of the room was clean, empty, no scratch marks on the wall, nothing suspicious at all except the feeling of being watched, which I figured was just related to last night's incident. So I went for a smoke to calm my nerves, and asked what it meant that a door didn't lock. The guy on staff duty told me it was a room they used for people on suicide watch. Well shit, I thought, so this was fun. Of course, this was just a start. Later on that day, I rationalized it was probably someone who knew the room was open and was sneaking in to bang his girlfriend or some shit. I considered checking it out next time the banging started, but frankly, both possible results of either finding some otherworldly shit going down, and watching some guy bump literal uglies with some stripper from Clarksville were equally unappealing. There was no need, however, there were no loud sounds coming from the other room for about a week. Then I spent all day drinking water for a urine test, and spent the rest of my evening pissing clear liquid. I thought I was done, until I woke up at like 3 a.m. needing to piss real bad. That's when I heard it. The banging and the moans had stopped, but that scraping noise was sounding closer. And this could have been my imagination, but I could swear I could see fingers prodding out of my wall for an instant. I ended up saying fuck this noise, and sleeping in the bathtub that night. The next day, I went back into the room to change. Everything looked the same except dimmer, somehow. I figured it was because I'd just woken up, but it stayed like this the rest of the day. Needless to say, I was spending less and less time in my room. That weekend I got absolutely wasted, and ended up passing out in my bed. I woke the next morning with my cell phone in hand, a new text open with the words "It's coming" typed in. I just had to burst into laughter at how corny it was. Part of me swore it was just drunk me fucking with hungover me, which is something I would do, actually. The next day I hooked up with this girl and we fucked, only to have her scream out, "I shit you not, it's coming." I was certain I'd misheard and she'd said, but I was bursting into laughter anyway, much to her confusion. I explained the situation after, and it turned out she was big into the supernatural and psychic stuff. No surprise, I did meet her at a hookah bar. So of course she suggested a Ouija board, but I refused, saying this shit was already cliché enough as is. She then suggested I ask to switch rooms, which was reasonable, but I guess partially due to stubbornness and laziness, I kept putting it off. A couple of nights later I woke up to what I could have sworn was a grab of my shoulder, stood up, and in the darkness, on the floor I could see what looked like the outline of a million fat, giant black worms. Actually, shape-wise I'd say they were more like leeches, writhing on the floor. It wasn't quite even a physical shape, more like I could see the shadows of their invisible bodies. At which point I went nope.jpg, and cocooned myself in a fetal position inside my blanket, certain I was hallucinating, only to eventually pass out. The next morning I woke up to find a wormless floor, and figured it was just a really vivid dream, only to find what looked like its ear scrawled into my little weatherproof notebook, as if I'd written it with my left hand. After downing a keg. and suffering from a concussion. Basically, it was almost eligible, which was a perfect opportunity for me to dismiss it as being able to be anything. So I go on later in the day to take a shower after PT, in the little bathroom right next to the kitchen and bedroom. These were really small barracks rooms, only to have my horrible rendition of the Red Hot Chili Peppers Under the Bridge interrupted by the sound of someone moving around in the kitchen area. I pause, and yell out, "Who's there?" with no reply. I never hear a door open or close, which is odd because if it had been staff, they sure weren't mindful about making all sorts of other noise. So there I am, naked, steam coming off me. I like my showers hot, carrying the towel holder pole as if it would do something, only to find the room empty. I relax, putting the pole down, only to feel like something was breezing behind me. I swear, I think I broke some sort of record for changing into clothes and bolting out the room that day. So I talked to my squad leader about switching rooms, claiming I still can't sleep due to the noise, and ask for an appointment with a social worker because reasons. I decide to go to my room only to grab essentials and bolt, accidentally leaving stuff in my friends' rooms to avoid trips. Social work was no help. They suggested it might be brought on by insomnia, but that still didn't explain a lot of the details, nor the fact that it was directly connected to that room. I went back into it, packing my stuff little by little for whenever there was a room available, but I'm guessing whatever was in there decided it was tired of subtleties. One day, as I was about to leave the room after packing, I felt a spout of vertigo, that quick feeling of the room spinning, only to find the shit I'd packed strewn across the floor. This happened several times as I tried getting through the door, only to eventually give up and stay in, skipping dinner. The next morning I ended up calling and coaxing my friend into meeting him in my room for breakfast. He called me to ask where I was after he'd knocked on my door several times and no one answered. I managed to get to the open door and meet him in the hallway at least, but spent most of that morning trying to coax him into coming over. Someone had to see what was going on. I couldn't do this alone, but I couldn't tell anyone either. My depression was getting to me as well. I had started cutting myself. Nothing too deep. I guess just as a way of making sure I was awake. Luckily no one noticed, or rather unluckily, because at this point I'd rather be institutionalized. Shit was getting weirder. I leaned against the wall at one point, only to feel it wriggling underneath me. I'd talk to myself, simple stuff like, "Did I leave this in my pocket?" and hear a reply in my head that wasn't my own. Things would randomly be out of place, thin yellow slime trails would appear to be sweating out of random spots on the wall, I'd occasionally feel random touches with nobody there, and, weirdest of all, I think, random little dried up frog corpses would appear seemingly out of nowhere. Finally, my squad leader came through, almost a month later, saying I had 2 days to move to the next room and clean this one up, so after leaving the place spotless and frog corpse free, it was my last night in that room. Everything was packed and ready to go, and I was absolutely exhausted. I decided to lay down in full uniform because fuck it, and dozed off. Without fail, 3 a.m., I had to take a piss. So I go to the bathroom, and as I'm about to walk back into the room, I see it. The thing had an adult-sized head, and a small, disproportionate torso. It had long, greasy, black hair, and its entire skin looked like that of a burn victim's. Its limbs looked boneless and coiled around like tentacles with fingers at the end. What passed for its head were just 3 large, gaping holes with what looked like giant black worms wriggling inside it. Those holes gaped wider as it released an inhuman scream. Then I realized part of that screaming was me, and I bolted out of the room. I stayed up the rest of the night, smoking outside without talking. For some reason, the idea that this was a Hispanic woman came into my head, although that thing looked like it had never been human. The next day I moved to a separate room upstairs, which was stupid, given that I was in crutches, and remember thinking, man, maybe I should have taken Chloe up on that Ouija board, and feeling real bad for it for some reason. A week later, I woke up in the middle of the night, only to hear that sound again. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Luckily however, 4 days later we did a mass move to the newly finished barracks a few streets down, and those old ones became MP barracks. And hey, y'all know, fuck MPs. They could have that shit. I did ask around however, and people did claim to see weird shit in those barracks every now and then, but at least my story there was done. Also, I sorta regret not taking pictures, but honestly there was nothing to take pictures of other than tiny little frog carcasses. And that's just weird, yo. Also, when you're that fucking terrified, surprisingly your mind doesn't usually think gee, this sure would make for a great Kodak moment. So, story takes place in 2007. It was, and still is, the only paranormal experience I have ever had. I was working at a TV station in a small town. I'm not going to say which one, but you may be able to figure it out with the details I provide. Don't really give a fuck if you want to try to figure it out. I worked as a master control operator on the late shift. The station I worked in was creepy as fuck for a couple reasons. Firstly, the building was old as hell. A lot of the structure of the building used for storage in the area where the transmitter was just in absolutely horrible condition. Cracks in walls, broken lights, exposed wiring, etc. In retrospect, it was probably actually pretty dangerous. The other reason this building was so creepy was that at one point in the 70s, it fucking burned down, and it was rumored that several people died in the fire. I have never been able to confirm this, though I've been told specific names of the deceased. Being the cheap bastards the family that owned the place were, instead of rebuild all of the building, they kept part of the fucking thing that stayed up, and rebuilt a new part onto the remaining standing part. When I worked there, the original part of the building was now entirely condemned and all but falling down. There were 2 floors of the original building. A huge room that used to be a bowling alley, and an upstairs part that was used entirely for storage of old files and records. Now, I don't know exactly why there was a bowling alley as part of the old TV station, but I also know that they used to do a local wrestling show there as well. I guess TV stations just did weird shit in the 70s? Anyway, this condemned portion of the building was the creepiest part of it. The bowling alley was frozen in time. Covered in dust, everything still there. Fuck, I even found old scorecards in shoe cubbies when I went exploring in there on the nights and weekends. The bowling alley was completely cut off from power. It had no light except for sunlight through dusty windows and cracks in the wall. At night, a flashlight was the only light in that pitch black ass area. It was creepy. The only noises heard in there were sounds of dripping water. It's worth mentioning that it was pretty much an unspoken rule that everyone understood that we weren't supposed to go in there. The only 2 doors to access it were behind the front desk and through a locked door in the copy room. I was like 18 at the time, I didn't give a fuck. I went back there when I was alone or when the skeleton crew was working. Sometimes me and some production and news people would go back there and explore. Like I said, this place was frozen in time. Upstairs, along with the files, we found boxes of old records like music records, Michael Jackson LPs and such. Stuff that might have been worth some money. There were plenty of reasons to take people exploring over there. So, that's some history, onto the experience. I was working the sign-off shift one night as usual. The usual procedure was that at midnight, everyone except Master Control fucked off. Production, the remaining engineer, the news people all left around midnight. I was generally alone in the building until 2-3 a.m. until the station signed off. On this particular night, my buddy came up to the station to hang out with me, we'll call him Dan for convenience sake. I had people come chill up there pretty often. Friends liked checking out the station, and there wasn't shit to do but kill time. So it's about midnight and me and Dan are chilling watching whatever stupid shit was on air at the time, likely Bones or Family Feud or something gay. I start telling him about the bowling alley. I hype some shit up about how the people that died in the fire haunt that area and decide we can go ghost hunting. So I decide it's safe to let the automation just run for a while and we can leave the control room and go exploring. I take Dan or Dave or whatever the fuck his name is for a tour around the outside of the building first, showing him how fucked up it is. There were literally transmission lines going up to the tower that were held up on supports built on crumbling sheetrock. There was a sticker on a door that was bolted shut to the bowling alley that read, "Watch for overhead wires, you can be killed." God damn, that place was jank. Anyway, I give Dan the usual tour I've given to like 5 people by now. Usually it was bitches because bitches love a brave man in a scary as fuck place. We go back there with flashlights and the walkie-talkies, and the whole time we're trying to contact spirits of the deceased with our walkie-talkies. Listening for voices, interference, etc. Didn't really get anything but some static, but it's a TV station, what did I expect? We were back there for probably all of a half an hour and we went back to the control room to resume being lazy fucks. Some time goes by, and a walkie-talkie that I had left on started making some pretty fucked up noises. Definitely sounded like a really deep and static-y voice. Didn't think much of it because once again, TV station. Lots of equipment signals. Humor this and tried to talk to what or whoever it was. Push button and talk into mic asking if anyone is there. Keep hearing something, but indistinguishable. Now the set of walkie-talkies made that very generic bloop sound every time you pushed the button to talk. After a few minutes of trying to talk to what I thought was nothing, the walkie-talkie started making that bloop noise all on its own. What the fuck? Maybe the dude on the other end is trying to use Morse or something because we can hear each other very well? Pick up mic and talk and say if you can hear me, beep once for yes. Bloop. We grab the second walkie-talkie and tune it to the same channel, and nothing is happening. Not only is this only happening to one walkie-talkie, but we cannot make the second walkie-talkie simulate that same bloop noise on the other. Pushing the button is literally the only way to get the thing to make that fucking noise. This was the first moment when I went into, okay, maybe something is actually happening here, mode. Start asking things like, is anyone there, beep once. If you can hear me, beep once. If you're in the building, beep once. It would beep once every single time. Also, it would not beep if you didn't say anything. It literally only responded when prompted. It was not Dan fucking with me. He was right next to me in plain view, other walkie-talkie was off. Set walkie-talkie down on the table. No one is touching it. Say out loud, if anyone can hear me, beep once. Bloop. Nope. Motherfucking JPG. Dan and I run out of the room. We search the newsroom, studio, hallways, bathrooms, transmitter rooms, offices, parking lot, everywhere for people. No one. I get up to the entry room where the front desk / bowling alley door was. Bowling alley door is wide open. I closed and locked that fucker. I always did. Every time. This is where I begin to go into panic and events are a little less clear. Dan and I head back to the control room and shut all the doors so no one could hear inside the room. Walkie-talkie lays silently on the desk by the board. Ask again if it's in there. Bloop. Ask if it can see me. Bloop. Decide that maybe someone could still be tricking me and is listening in on me somehow. Decide to see if this thing can really see me. I stand in front of the board and face the monitor wall. If I'm facing the monitor wall, beep twice. Bloop bloop. No. Fucking way. This was the first time this thing had beeped twice. I turn 180 degrees. If I'm facing the monitor wall, beep twice. If I'm facing the racks, beep once. Bloop. I didn't believe it. I tested it again and again and again. Turning to different orientations and asking for different numbers of beeps. It got it right. Every single time. I'm panicked. It's now like 2:20 a.m. and I haven't logged break times for over an hour. I can no longer do my job, I am so fucking terrified. At some point, Dan and I just accept that we are in contact with something otherworldly. I ask it if it came out of the bowling alley. It did. I asked if it died in the fire. It did not. I asked it if there was a god. It said there was. Now, last time I told this story people says, herder, your story was good until you got to this part confirmed fake. I don't really care, I'm not going to omit it, cause it fucking happened. As I am shifting into this new and terrifying worldview based on the experience I'm having, I ask if there is a hell. Bloop. Are you in hell? Bloop. On a scale of 1 to 10 by number of beeps, how bad is hell? Bloop 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 bloop. It wouldn't stop. I start crying. I don't remember how many times it beeped before it finally stopped. I tried to calm down, and pretty much at this point ignore the walkie-talkie and stop asking questions, and start replaying shit with Dan, and trying to come up with explanations, and catch up with my work. It's getting close to sign-off time, so I start with my close-up shop procedures, etc. As I'm shutting some shit off and talking to Dan, this thing starts beeping in series of 3. Just 3, pause. 3. Pause. Over and over. Start trying to determine and ask it some important of 3. It's like 2:45 a.m. 3 o'clock? Bloop. Sign off? Bloop bloop. No? Is something going to happen at 3 o'clock? Bloop. Fuck this. There is no way I'm going to be in this building. I set up the automation to automatically go to color bars after the national anthem and just go ahead and turn off the fucking transmitter 15 minutes early. Fuck this walkie-talkie, turn the fucker off and throw it on the charger. Dan and I go outside into the parking lot, he leaves. 3 a.m. comes. Nothing happens. Wait and see what happens because I have to go back inside to load the next day's playlist. Nothing. At like 3:02 I decide, scared as fuck, to go back inside. As I'm walking back towards the door, I hit the deck after I heard an ear-shattering clank, wobbly 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 kaboom. And then the sound of something fucking electrical like shorting out. The huge boom came from our main network receiver dish. The thing is like 30 feet in diameter and up on a huge robotic tripod. The thing somehow slipped out of lock and literally fell with all its weight, collapsing to the bottom position, facing the ground. I call my boss, the chief engineer, immediately. Tells me he'll be there immediately. He lives right up the street so he'll be there in like 2 minutes. Follow sound of the shorting out sound. Find that between the building and the sheetrock wall, a fucking transmission line broken is completely unrelated to the dish falling. That fucking sticker about overhead wires was not lying. Boss shows up. Tell him I was outside smoking when the thing fell. He proclaims, I have never seen anything like this before. We go in together to the sound of alarms related to the dish. I tell him about the transmission line, tell him the next day's guy will have to do the playlist because fuck you I'm leaving. He literally does not give a fuck and has bigger fish to fry. I get in my truck and hit the road. I call my buddy William who was always fucking up late as shit to tell him about what happened. As I am going over the events with him, out of the earpiece of the phone. And I shit you not. It goes bloop, and Will fucking heard it too. This is exactly how it fucking happened. Sorry if some of you fuckers don't like it because it isn't nice and tidy and perfect like your made-up Skinwalker pastas, but this is how fucking shit went down. I still can't explain it to this day, and I never tell anyone because people fucking laugh. I come to tell /X and some of you will still bitch about it. Well, file this fucking story away under True Pasta because I did not just type all of this shit up to just be dismissed. We'll be happy to answer questions if anyone has any.